All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from Lascar.info, and this is our post-race show for Kansas. We'll get rolling here in a little bit here as everybody starts coming in here a little bit. Well, no shortage of things to certainly talk about this week, and we'll certainly get into that too. All right. So, well, unofficially, we'll go ahead and lead off here. Unofficially, as we come to you here at the end of the race here, Kyle Busch, unofficially your winner, the 10th different winner in 11 races this season. Kyle Busch pulling off the weekend sweep along with the Truck Series race that he shouldn't have been in yesterday. But a weekend sweep nonetheless, winning on his birthday for the second time in his career. Probably should have been obvious in hindsight that one of the Busch brothers would win this, although in my mind, thinking about the a race that's sponsored by Busch makes me think Busch Series, but you know, here nor there. That's what makes this interesting. But certainly a lot to talk about. We'll definitely talk about the last place battle. We'll talk about the tire that may or may not have should have caused caution there. Talk about the action from the Truck Series. We also do our show and tell segment as well as our trivia segment here later tonight. So for those of you who are new to the show, we'll certainly talk about those as well. We'll also, of course, talk about the tragic news that came through this morning about Eric McClure, and we'll also talk about every other bit of action here from this week. So leading off here, we'll definitely talk about the Cup Series race here. Very unusual one in a number of respects. First of all, the Kansas race, I guess maybe this isn't as unusual. We've had actually 4 races coming into this that had more than 200 laps completed by the last place finisher. And Josh Bilicki has now unofficially joined that list, driving the number 52 car that he managed to just pass Ty Dillon's record from 2018 when the last restart began at the end of the race there. He ended up beating the record by 3 laps, the 247 laps that Ty Dillon had in 2018. And now Josh Bilicki beating that record in the process there. Maybe it's a bit surprising given the fact that Ricky Stenhouse got in that wreck towards the end of the race and dropped him actually out of the event, but just showing how few drivers were actually within a narrow range of the leaders there. You had multiple drivers, much like we had at Richmond actually, with the big exception of Justin Haley falling out after the first lap. You know, if you have a driver that falls out towards the very end of the race, they're not guaranteed to finish in last, and that was certainly the case this time around. Even if we had an overtime finish, it wouldn't have changed that immediately. It was a margin of about 7 or 8 laps. Although with the way NASCAR was handling the cautions today, you could certainly argue that you know, they were probably going to have a possible outcome that was going to be changed at that point, but that was not the case. Matt Mills was about the only driver that was challenging for last place for much of this event. Mills making his Cup debut in a return for the B.J. McLeod Motorsports team, separate from BJ's effort, the Live Fast team there, along with Matt Tifft. So many Matts in the series these days. But now Mills and Bilicki seem to be trading the last place position for much of the race. Quinn Half joined the battle there when they had some equipment that got left in the rear glass of the car. It cost them a penalty that they had to come back down pit road. Things didn't shake out very well for them. Cody Ware spun out at the entrance of pit road, but even neither of them were really able to hold a candle to Bilicki and Mills for most of this race. Bilicki again edging Mills unofficially by 5 laps at the finish of this race. And so far, again, pending post-race inspection, it is going to be Bilicki with his first last place finish of his Cup Series career. Not his first in the top 3 divisions. I believe he's finished last in both Xfinity in trucks. I know for sure he had the last place run in trucks last year at Las Vegas. So it won't be the first time that he's been featured on the website, but we'll certainly be talking about him later tonight. Mentioning the issue with Ricky Stenhouse Jr., heartbreak for them at the end of the race there, getting collected by Christopher Bell after that spin in turn 3, collecting both JTG entries. Serious damage to both of them. Stenhouse actually eliminated from the race. I believe unofficially Stenhouse probably be the only DNF unless Priest got parked there after the serious damage to the rear of his car as well in that incident. We'll certainly see how that looks like in the final race results. One driver I was very impressed with for much of this distance was Austin Cindric. Seemed to be working in the top 15, even flirting with the top 10 at some points Unfortunately, he also got in an incident with Ricky Stenhouse and ended his run or dropped him a bit further back in the lineup. Shown now in the 22nd spot, last car on the lead lap. But that, of course, getting overshadowed with a number of different stories that happened during this race as well. Brad Keselowski looked like he had the best car at the beginning. Kyle Larson certainly in the middle to late stages. Ultimately, neither of them reaching victory lane. And Kyle Busch, who had been lurking in the top 5 for much of the distance, able to jump up and score his first victory since that midweek race at Texas we had last fall. So good turnaround for him. Now punches his ticket into the championship, although he was already in the top 16 to begin with, right there behind Hamlin, Harvick, and Chase Elliott among drivers who hadn't won yet this season. But again, going into Darlington next week, Hamlin, Harvick, Chase Elliott, Austin Dillon, you got Chris Buescher, Stenhouse, other drivers of that caliber have not yet won this year, and there's still a possibility that whoever's going to be the 11th different winner, the Lady in Black, may have a say in that as well. But we'll certainly get to that next week. So, but yes, Josh Bilicki, unofficially your last place finisher. Great job by Matt DiBenedetto, bouncing back from his disappointing loss last week at Talladega to finish in the 4th spot. Almost had 3rd until Keselowski, guess who, edged him again at the finish there. So good run for him. Usually tend to see him run very well more at Las Vegas like we saw last year. But looks like they got a good 1.5-mile program in general to kind of build off of Penske's efforts as well. Joey Logano had food poisoning this weekend. Where did he finish, actually? He was up there for a bit, but finished in the 17th spot on the lead lap. They didn't actually have a relief driver for him. So good effort for him. Hopefully he's recovering well enough after that. Kyle Larson, again, mentioning that he was running as well as he did for much of the distance. Unfortunately, he had an incident with Ryan Blaney. And like we saw in several incidents during the Truck Series race yesterday, actually managed to save the car from wrecking, but still ended up further back in the lineup. Larson in the 19th spot there at the finish, and other drivers further back as well. Ross Chastain was also very impressive, coming back from a pre-race penalty to work his way into the top 10 very early in the race. Unfortunately, he ends up further back in the 14th spot there. Michael McDowell very quietly got a 13th place run to build on the great qualifying effort that he was able to have under the metric after his great run at Talladega last week. He really capitalized on that. I believe if that's not his best finish at Kansas, it's certainly in the running. Not a track that you would expect him to typically do that well on, but perhaps serving notice that they're not going to be the big pushovers that maybe people are expecting them to be once the playoffs start and you have as many 1.5 in that division at the time. Lots of controversy in this one. One of the first, of course, being Ryan Newman's situation on pit road, reminiscent of, I think it was 2015 or 2016, where a lot of the teams figured out that they could pull the panel in front of the rear tires and get the big aerodynamic advantage. Remember Joey Logano's team in particular really taking that to an absolute extreme there. So he got actually a piece of the sheet metal pulled out quite a ways. This time NASCAR calling it during the race for Ryan Newman, where they had a bit of the panel pulled out. I believe it was on the in front of the right rear tire this time around. They actually called him back in to get the push back in there, ultimately dropping Newman further back in the order. He ended up getting back on the lead lap at the end of this thing and finishing the 16th spot there. His teammate Chris Buescher was involved in the other controversy that we had in this, and we'll certainly talk about that. You think about a few years ago, I think it was one of the JTG teams actually had a tire roll out into the middle of the infield grass at Atlanta. Crew member got back out there to grab the tire, and NASCAR threw a caution at that point. In this case today, you had a tire that rolled away from Tyler Reddick's crew, was just on the very edge of the grass, but still within an area where if anybody swung wide coming out of pit road would have very easily been able to hit it. And of course, you know, any of these cars hit one of these tires, it's an unpredictable and very dangerous projectile. So, you know, certainly should have been treated a bit more seriously than NASCAR handled it. But of course, happening during the exchange of pit stops, it seemed a little strange that NASCAR was actually kind of holding back, what was it, like 15 laps before they actually threw the caution. I think it was Eric Estep was pointing this out, or a couple other people as well, saying that really, look, either you throw the caution right when it happens or you don't throw the caution at all. NASCAR seemingly wanting to have their cake and eat it too in this situation seems a bit of a reckless decision. Obviously, nobody wants a race to be decided by a caution that comes out the wrong time. But NASCAR has not really, been without events like that have actually kind of made the races even more interesting. Not to say that NASCAR should make a decision based on making a race more interesting, but if it definitely seems like this was a situation where they wanted the people that were leading much of the race to still be a factor at the end and not have that change hands at the end. But if NASCAR is doing that for an entertainment standpoint, it's actually really counterproductive, because the caution that comes out in the middle of the pit cycle really makes the race more interesting. In working on the video on Carl Long, I was researching one of the races that he was involved in 2001, the Fall Rockingham race. A caution came out when Long hit the wall during green flag pit stops and ultimately dropped only about 5 cars on the lead lap. And you had a very interesting setup at that point, because a lot of the people that were contending for the lead at that point weren't really that dominant the first part of the race. Came down to Joe Nemechek, Kenny Wallace, I believe Kurt Busch was in the mix, and it really changed the complexion of the race, especially in this case where, unlike today where it was towards the end of the race, it was about halfway through. So this is, again, something that NASCAR seems to constantly have a problem with, is just letting things play out naturally. Sometimes if you let things play out naturally, you're going to have a race where, a driver wins the race by a lap or by that. But other times you can have a caution that comes out at a weird time, and you can have something that's just as interesting, like the 2001 Rockingham race there. Ultimately ended up being, I think it was Nemechek's first win since he left the Sabatas team in '99. And probably wouldn't have happened if that caution didn't come out. But again, if you have a situation like that where it's either a wreck in that case or a loose wheel in this case, just let it play out naturally. Don't fight the actual momentum of the event. It's the same reason I'm not really a big fan of the playoffs. If you just kind of let the points work out the way they can and focus on a driver actually trying to work their way back up the standings after a rough start, that would be much more interesting. So hopefully, this is something that, and it seems like the reaction was pretty negative to how NASCAR handled that, and I'd have to certainly agree in that standpoint. But maybe things will work out on that point as well. Beast of Metal, thank you for the super chat here. First of all, did you see or hear the 12 questions feature Gluck did with Jennifer Jo Cobb, specifically the part where she pointed out no practice or no discount scuffs for micro budgets, which equal higher costs and fewer tires? I have not read that article yet. I need to check that out. Gluck does great work there, and especially when he talks to some of these underfunded drivers, that would be definitely a big thing to focus on there. It's really interesting, the lack of practice that you bring up in that example. And again, I'm not so much referencing the articles. I haven't read it yet, but the issue that you're bringing up here is very interesting, because there seems to be a little bit of a split here with some of these underfunded teams and drivers. Some of the ones that I've talked to have mentioned that not having practice and qualifying actually makes it more affordable, because they don't have to pay for extended hotel stays for their teams, because they don't have to do special practice or qualifying setups. They just focus on it on the race. Other times they have to get more creative, where they really have to make sure the car is operating before they load it up on the truck, versus knowing that they're not going to have a practice session when they get actually out to the racetrack. But some of these are cost-saving measures that's actually making it easier for them. But if Cobb, and again, I'm going to have to look the article up to get more context on this, if it's a situation where they're not getting scuffed tires, then yeah, you certainly have an issue with that. And, teams really having difficulty, being able to keep going, sometimes being able to get an extra set of tires, even if it has been previously used, especially in Cobb's case, where we mentioned this last week with the whole controversy with her at Talladega. She actually had to buy tires from, or actually rather fans paid for her tire bill to keep going after she flat spotted some in a spin at Talladega to keep her going. That could be, an absolutely big difference into whether they're going to actually be able to complete the rest of the distance or not. You even go further back than that, back in 2018 at Watkins Glen, when you had the rain at the track and not a lot of the small teams had rain tires, it had to just sit there and just keep losing laps while everybody else is out there having fun with the rain tires they were able to afford. So there does need to be a compromise there. I'm hopeful, especially Chris was tweeting about this, about the possibility of practice and qualifying coming back next year. I hope he's certainly right about that, because the sport just isn't the same without it. As to whether we're still going to have 2-day shows or 3-day shows after that, that's going to be something interesting to find out. But I would think if you're running multiple divisions, you're going to have at least 3 days at that point. But it's something that needs to be kind of re-examined. But there's a lot of interesting discussions there among the smaller teams about what if this is working out, very well for them or not. Certainly, you see a race like today where nobody's falling out of the event, and you have mechanical issues or whatever the problems were for Bilicki. It sounded like something with the fuel pump, although the team was saying that there was a new fuel pump in there and something wasn't just working to keep the car up to pace. If something like that could be caught in practice after just running even just a few laps, maybe just shortening practice or not having as many practice sessions, find some kind of compromise there. And then maybe bring a situation in there where they'd be able to run scuffed tires again or something, to that length there. Maybe it's an issue where you have a difference between how it works out in the Xfinity Series versus the Truck Series, with the margins being different between the two of them there. So, that would be something. I'm gonna have to look at the article to get more context there. But again, I'd be very interested to hear the standpoint on the same issues from an Xfinity Series driver versus a Truck Series driver, because maybe that's the big difference there as to how important the scuffed tires are versus saving costs to be able to run, even just one car, much less a team like Carl Long's where they run multiple teams on a really limited budget. That would be kind of interesting to talk about. Let's see. Looking at other things in the lineup here. So again, going back to playing things out naturally. I think the most prudent thing would have been either throw the caution for the tire being out there right when it happened, or don't throw the caution at all. And I think the more prudent way would have been to throw the caution right when it happened. NASCAR seems to in the past not have any issue throwing cautions, even if somebody manages to basically save a truck or a car out there. I'm thinking of Carson Hocevar's incident yesterday, where he was dead sideways and saved it, and they still threw the yellow for that. There just needs to be some form of consistency. And I know that a lot of this is a judgment call, and we see this at the end of the races too. I mean, how many times have we talked about how many finishes have been ruined by throwing a caution in the last lap? I think it would be much easier if you just had a rule where you didn't throw a caution on the last lap. So anybody that has an incident, they know that, make sure that they still stay, strapped in their cars and don't drop the window net or anything, because there's not going to be a caution until the leaders get to the finish line. That would be something that they could look at. It's if the way that you get consistency is just a firmer rule or a much more clearly set up rule in the drivers' meeting, then maybe that would be the solution. Or if it's just more consistent calls, one way or the other, NASCAR needs to address this, and this is just one of many examples the sport has had. But at least it's encouraging some good discussion on the topic, and hopefully we'll see a bit more of that this week when we go into Darlington. But that'll be something to certainly cover as well. Let's see. Looking further back, we mentioned the issues with JTG. Rick Ware's team is further back there as well. Garrett Smith, 33rd, actually finishing ahead of Ricky Stenhouse after the wreck there. So good to see on that. Again, Matt Mills just figuring things out. It was interesting that Mills never got warned, at least not when I listened to it. He never got warned to pick up his speed. The team was talking to him about picking up speed there at that point. But Bilicki was actually getting a lot of the warnings to pick up his speed in that one. We had much more of an issue with that in the truck race yesterday, and we'll talk about that as well. But good to see for Mills, at least starting in the Cup Series. Completely different car, very challenging track, I think, in this sense too. I mean, it definitely gets very physical in the late laps, and we saw that today. And a lot of the wrecks that they showed in the pre-race there showed how physical this track can be, even though it's, on the surface seems like just another cookie cutter track. You think about it compared even to Chicagoland, where they've had a lot of races where a lot of the drivers finish on the lead lap or finish very close to it, or have the last place finish or finish under power. Kansas had that in this case here, but a lot of other times the race gets so physical that somebody drops out. That wasn't the case this time around. So, once the race played out this way, Bilicki was in very elite company with very few drivers falling out after very, completing a very large portion of the event instead. But an interesting story nonetheless. So Wrinklestein, somebody saying this is worse than Spingate. I think that's a bit of an exaggeration. I think the whole Spingate thing was pretty terrible. And then you had on top of that, the 100% rule came into play there because there were issues with other drivers there. There was a lot of manipulation. And again, you wouldn't. Part of this again is NASCAR. Of course, NASCAR is officiating, but also their decisions in the way they set up this championship, this playoff system, and everything else, and everything from the stage cautions, the stage breaks, the playoffs, breaking everything into a smaller and smaller piece. You just encourage more and more manipulations. And then when the officials are starting to manipulate outcomes, then people are just really questioning what they're even watching at some point. I mean, did Kyle Busch win this race because he had the best car and had the best overall strategy? Well, yes, you could say that, but it's conditioned because of all these other things that happen. And unfortunately, it's not fair to Kyle either. Or whoever wins these races. I think at some point when you manipulate things so much to this degree, somehow and sometimes things just, it's like, what does the victory mean anymore? What does the championship mean if you have so many other little things that happen? And again, racing is already unpredictable enough. You could already have mechanical issues that happen to cars, or drivers that just make mistakes or get exhausted or anything like that. All that happens naturally. So throwing all this other stuff in there, and I think, I'm not saying anything new here. That's really been, something that I think turns a lot of people off on that. And maybe it takes incidents like this to really kind of bring that into focus. But whether or not it will, really hard to say. But, I'm sure it's just going to get kicked down the line. And, maybe we'll have some more examples of this going up forward. But, how much of it is too many rules, how many of it is not enough, and how many of it is officiating, I think it's all up for debate. But, again, it's always about the next lap, the next race, and everything from there. And it's hard to really kind of slow things down and evaluate those things from one week to the next. I think that, again, we've talked about in the past, the NASCAR solution usually is just to add something on top of something that already exists rather than go back, reevaluate something, and question whether it needs to be there in the first place. Hopefully that changes, but I'm not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon. Alex Viveros, thank you for the super chat as well. If I'm a sponsor, I'd be mad at NASCAR for that caution with the tire for possibly hurting my driver's chance at winning. If I spend millions, make it fair. Very good point. Again, think about the people that were sponsoring Chris Buescher in this case. And they were working some strategy and knowing that this tire was out there and knowing that would ordinarily cause a caution. And they have a great chance that if the caution comes out and they're still on the track, they get to pit, they get to trap a ton of people that were competing for the win a lap down. And who knows what's going to happen. And with the existing rules that you have in there on wave arounds and lucky dogs and everything, who's to say anybody that got trapped a lap down isn't going to be able to win the race, even when the caution was going to happen, with like 40 or 50 laps to go in this one here. Look at how much ended up actually happening at the end of this. Even on the last lap of the race, a lot of positions changed hands. So yeah, I absolutely get that in that standpoint. That would be something that would upset it, and it kind of dovetails with, of course, the other controversy that sprung back up again here about the fact that the RTA is consulting with the Nielsen Group about moving the numbers back on the cars again, which for some reason they are just absolutely dead set and determined to do, even though moving the numbers forward seemed like it's a more logical option if they have to move them anywhere since the contingencies are cleared up. But I don't know. But that's definitely something that needs to be, needs to be looked at. And again, it's symptoms of the same problem here, where NASCAR is just not allowing things to play out naturally. They need to at least experiment with that, and I think that there's a desire for that. I think the infamous "boys have at it" thing was a good example of that back in 2010, where there was perhaps too much officiating and drivers just running single file at Talladega and not doing anything, perhaps because they were just too scared of actually getting any penalties or breaking this rule or that rule. Maybe they need to, not brand it the same way, but kind of loosen things up a little bit. Maybe we're reaching that extreme again. It is more than a decade since that happened. But it's a constant balance. It needs to be worked out, but we'll see how that shakes out. Let's see. Let's see. Boyer 5 years to win again. Yeah. But yeah, very, very bizarre race, though. There's certainly no shortage of stuff to talk about. Among them, also the continuing battles between 2311 and Team Trackhouse there. Trackhouse scoring this time around, working some of that strategy this time around, running in about the 11th position unofficially at the finish. Bubba Wallace did a great job saving his car despite a little bit of damage he suffered to the right rear of the car. Some strategy didn't work out for him. Finishing back in the 26th spot, one lap down. I believe he gained one of his laps back after he had the issue there on the backstretch, but a bit further back in the line there. But we'll see how both of them deal with Darlington next week. Very curious what the throwback's going to be. Have they revealed either of the throwbacks? I think that Marcus Lemonis had a suggested Camping World one for Suarez, but I know that they unveiled this Dr. Pepper scheme for Bubba Wallace, which is a bit different from the BK Racing one, which I think the BK Racing one actually looks a little bit better. But I think that could be something else that we talk about going forward. But and again, one change I will be pleased with, actually, I got to say, and again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm just against changing anything, because some things need to be changed for a reason, and other things, at least need to be looked at. I like the idea about Throwback Weekend being in the spring race. I'm not crazy about them putting a race on Mother's Day weekend. I thought that was kind of a nice vestige from the history of the sport where they wouldn't have a race on Mother's Day weekend like they wouldn't on Easter. But I like that Throwback Weekend is separate from the September race because you already have the Southern 500 being the Southern 500, a prestigious event, and having it really, in the playoff equation there as well. If you have the spring race, have the throwback thing, I think it's a nice kind of balance, certainly from a marketing standpoint. So some changes like that, I could see the clear reasoning. The number change, moving the numbers further back on the car, I still don't see the practical reason for that. I don't think that a sponsor shows up any better further up on the quarter panel than it would putting the number here and then using the entire rear part of the car. I know I mentioned that it doesn't seem like they're doing it for any clear reason or just no reason at all. I do think that it's probably because of, again, the design of the new car. I mentioned this a few weeks ago that I think, again, the rear quarter panel area behind the rear tire seems a lot smaller than before. And the actual wheel well seems to impinge a lot more on that panel that you usually see sponsors on. So I get that. But if that's the situation, then they should just say that. Why aren't they saying that? I think you would be able to calm a lot of this debate, by just addressing that and saying, well, this is the way the cars are designed. This is the better place to actually put the sponsors on the cars versus just leaving it up for debate and having everybody just be like wondering, why are they doing this? So I don't know. Maybe that'll be something that they'll look at, but I that's still my theory. I think that's something that, that they need to kind of look at a bit more too. Let's see. No tires, just gas. You may have some Lascar pictures for Dover. Yep, right on. Again, as I always mention in the show here, anybody that's at the track, we got some great pictures from DNF racers. So big thanks to them for the pictures that they sent out there this past weekend. We got some great pictures for the Truck Series, the Cup Series, and the ARCA race. Sent those over to our ARCA correspondent, William Saki, for his feature this week. So we'll have that for you guys later up here as well. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, look at the Cup results. I think we pretty much covered the Cup one here pretty well. If there's anything I didn't cover from that, we'll certainly talk about that as well. Let's go into the Truck Series race as well. We almost had kind of, in some respects similar to what we saw in the Cup race today, almost had a pretty dramatic finish to the truck race where it looked like Kyle Busch was actually going to not win a Truck Series race that he was entered in and seemed to be dominating for much of the event. At the end there, he had Ross Chastain, Bailey Curry having a great run in the number 45, taking over for Brett Moffitt. I thought they were going to really settle the race between themselves. Unfortunately, as we often see in some of these races, the Truck Series guys just running over each other at the finish and costing all of them a victory as Kyle Busch just effortlessly swung around them and took the victory there. Again, a very impressive weekend sweep here, but again, I still maintain that Kyle Busch really has no business being in the Truck Series, as a driver at least. His program has done wonders for John Hunter Nemechek, Although I think, about a good 80% of that is the fact that John Hunter developed his career with his family's team, had a very hands-on upbringing there, and actually won in efforts that didn't have any sponsorship and very little resources there. Kyle Busch just really took his talent to the next level, where he's now able to be a consistent winner. That's about the only thing that's really changed on that standpoint. But again, great run for John Hunter as well, finishing in the 5th spot. Would have been great to see, again, some of these other competitors actually being able to challenge for the lead there. But again, even with Chastain, you have the battle going down to 2 Cup Series regulars, and 2 Cup regulars that actually ended up doing pretty well in the Sunday race. Maybe, again, this is another symptom of not having practice or qualifying and actually encouraging Cup drivers to look more at these lower divisions again. I hope that's not the case. We certainly saw that at the Bristol Dirt Race, where Truex really had no ultimate reason to be in the dirt race there. I think him saying that, he was not really having that much dirt experience, it's like, well, look, I mean, okay, well, if that's the reason you need to be in the truck race, then we may as well put the entire Cup field in there, except for Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Then let's just put all the Cup guys in the truck field. So it's absurd. But, again, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. And unfortunately, that's another, challenge from that. I'll be very interested to see, again, Jennifer Jo Cobb's angle on the Jeff Gluck article, because it just comes off kind of distasteful a lot of times for a lot of these teams. Alex Viveros, thank you again for the super chat here. Odd idea for the All-Star race. Put the champions of trucks or Xfinity let run the open or in the show if they are not in Cup full time. Well, that would be pretty neat. Actually, it's not a bad idea. Looking ahead to this weekend and the fact that they have an Xfinity and a truck points race that weekend, it would be kind of interesting if you kind of had them stick around and had the best of that group compete in the All-Star race. I think, again, the All-Star race to me, and I know there's been plenty of memes already from this absolutely bizarre 6-stage format that's been unveiled this week. It seems strange that NASCAR, if we're talking about manipulating outcomes and wanting to do just any crazy thing that they can, a surprising lack of imagination when it comes to the actual format and what they're going to do in the All-Star race. They seem determined to manipulate everything that has to do with the championship and which teams are up there and when cautions come out and everything. But when it comes to the All-Star race, the format is pretty bare bones. Why don't they run that on a dirt track? Why don't they run that like you said there, Alex, with Xfinity and Truck Series guys in there? Why don't they run that at different tracks entirely? It just seems like they're very restrained in terms of how experimental they want to be with it, when really most people, I think, would be more forgiving of them just dumping all their efforts into it, and maybe just use that as their test area for different formats and all that. I know we saw that a little bit of them trying to do that at Bristol last year with not only moving the door numbers, but the admittedly pretty lame chassis lights under the rears of the cars that just didn't really do anything. They just seem to not want to go 100% into that. Just make it completely just crazy. When you look at a lot of the moments that happen in the All-Star race historically, the problem is that these moments are very much isolated in events that are usually pretty tame. I'm hopeful that at Texas this year, it's going to be a bit crazier because the track is just so bizarre at this standpoint with all the changes that have been made to it. But historically, even in one hot night in 1992, we're talking like one of only a few incidents that happened during the race just happened to have a really epic last lap. 1995, 2004, other great All-Star races, 2000. 2000 is probably the best one I could think of in terms of an overall competitive, unpredictable, just no holds barred All-Star race. I think other ones just had one or two good moments. And, I remember putting together the BSGN starting grids back then, and the real challenge of that being that you take a whole race that maybe wasn't that competitive or interesting and take like one really tiny clip from it and smash it against all these other ones. And nowadays there's enough craziness to happen in the points races that the All-Star race seems kind of tame in comparison. So really, I mean, if NASCAR wants to just be trying as many crazy things as they can, they need to be a little bit more imaginative with the All-Star race. And again, a little more just leaving it alone in the points races. And maybe that would be the decent balance that they can work out there. I'll be very interested to see, again, we're covering Texas for the All-Star race, haven't heard back on the credentials yet. We have a fallback plan if that doesn't go through. So we'll definitely be in the area there to cover the event. But I'll be very interested to see what it looks like in person, because maybe it's just an event that doesn't play well on TV or needs to be covered differently. It's one of many issues I think NASCAR should look at a little bit more critically. That perhaps hasn't been looked at as much as what they have been messing with. But you raised a good point there, Alex. So that would be another one to look at too. Yeah, Rockingham All-Star Race 2022. Yeah, I like that, McKee boys. I mean, you never know. When they brought back dirt track racing, I thought if you just had the current format for the All-Star race, that would be the best way to do it, because you already have heat races, you already have short distances. It seems like that's designed for dirt track racing, and yet we're exploring that only for points races now, which is fine, I guess. The Bristol Dirt Race, I mean, the weather was ultimately the biggest problem there, not so much the actual competition itself, but that would be something to kind of look at. Let's see. Yeah, then you had that one year that the wreck happened at the start and everybody pulled out backups. Exactly, yeah. Kind of a weird event in that standpoint. Bizarre last place finish battle here for the Truck Series here. Jennifer Jo Cobb in a rare start in a Ford. Kudos to the folks that were sharing the pictures from her live stream there, showing that she had apparently at least one former Thor Sport entry in the garage, running a Ford instead of her familiar Chevrolet. Hadn't run a Ford, I believe, since 2013. Hadn't run anything other than a Chevrolet since I think about 2015 or 2016. So a bit of a difference there at the standpoint too. Norm Benning, got to definitely mention a bit of an awful struggle that he's had this weekend. The fact that the truck, luckily not the trailer also, but his personal truck that towed his small hauler to the track was stolen from outside his hotel. Last report I've heard that they still haven't found the truck. They did file a police report for it, certainly hoping that something works out there. Last I heard this morning, Norm Benning was still at the track. A kind NASCAR official gave him and his crew some food overnight, as they had to stay an unexpected extra day there at the track. Hopefully by now they're loading up and being able to head back to their shop here in the meantime. Just unfortunate to see this latest trend. I think, again, a lot of these issues for these small teams there, they can't afford a big-time hauler, and they use just a small, like, toy hauler that's towed by a pickup truck. And I've heard actually reports about a lot of pickup trucks actually being targets of more thefts lately. And, when they see, I guess when a thief sees an average pickup truck versus one that's, towing a race car or something, they don't know one difference from one another. Often they usually have the hauler be pretty, unmarked and unremarkable, so they don't draw a lot of attention to it because either it's parked, in this case, at a hotel versus someplace else. We saw this in Jonathan Cohen's situation in 2015 when the 44 car was stolen and left in the woods, or Mike Harmon's hauler that's still been missing, that has the one of the cars that ran so well the Daytona infield road course last year. And Jennifer Jo Cobb had a similar situation as well. And now this one with Norm Benning, it's heartbreaking, because this is not a small loss for these teams. And the fact that they're able to stay the track, a lot more, it's an extra expense and a loss of manpower and a loss of time that they just don't have to recoup. So hopefully something works out there with the Benning story. That'll be one that we'll certainly be following up on as well if we hear some more information on that. But distressing news on that end. Benning mentioned it specifically on the radio when he was parked for not maintaining minimum speed during the race itself, and saying it's just awful that they're dealing with that on top of all that too. But Benning, 39th in the lineup there, just behind Ryan Reed. Ryan Reed, actually, just like Bilicki, getting his first last place finish, at least in the series for Bilicki. But Reed, his first ever in his, I believe, 176th combined Cup, Xfinity, and Truck Series start, finishing in the back with steering issues. A very rare reason to fall out. Jesse Iwuji, much like Norm Benning, was also black flagged twice for not maintaining minimum speed. Finished in the bottom five there. Jennifer Jo Cobb stalling at the exit of pit road to finish in 37th. And Tate Fogelman rounding out the bottom five there in that standpoint. But again, a lot of impressive drivers saving their trucks from spins, saving them from wrecks. Carson Hocevar while he was the top Nice Motorsport entry this time around, again, did a great job saving his truck from his wreck. Again, I think he's one of the, if not the biggest dark horse of the sport right now, and been very impressive following him this year. Looking forward to seeing him in action at Texas this next month. But that'll be something that we'll be looking ahead to as well. Let's see. Yeah, Wayne Peterson. Yeah, Wayne Peterson got their hauler stolen. Yeah, did that happen too? I forgot about that, Sir Rinkelstein. Thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, that would be another one to certainly talk about too. So yeah, again, all these small teams just having they try to make ends meet with limited resources, and unfortunately, again, this incidence of more and more of these pickup trucks being stolen lately, I think it's been more of an issue lately. I've heard about it more in the Texas region and everything, but I guess it's probably been an issue in Kansas as well. Alex, again, thank you again for the super chat there. Marcus is sponsor, guys, next week for trucks again. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, he tweeted apparently that nobody's going to be unsponsored for Throwback Weekend next week at Darlington. So fantastic for the drivers in that series. It's unfortunate that, again, that the title sponsor, or the CEO of the title sponsor, has to go to this extent to make sure these teams are funded. We've even seen two of the GMS trucks not sponsored between Zane Smith and Sheldon Creed this week. And, but again, there's only so much you can, any one person or one company can do. But he's really gone above and beyond to really try to make sure that these guys are able to stay out there and make some amount of money running out there. I know Norm Menning's still been running the same blue and yellow paint scheme on his truck in these recent weeks, even when they haven't had the Camping World or the Overton sponsor on his injury. But that'll be one thing to look at too. Very pleased with a lot of the old throwback schemes and everything that we've seen. They've unveiled a lot of them so late this week here, but very pleased with a lot of them. I love the Thea Dixon throwback that Motorsports Business Management put together. It looks like Matt Jaskell's returning to the series to run the 13 there, so kudos to him. They've always had the head-turning ones. Of course, last year they had that great Jerry Nadeau throwback that Chad Fincham ran, so was a big fan of that one for sure. But that'll be certainly exciting next week. Hopefully the broadcast will let us see a bit more of these throwbacks than in the past. I guess the other advantage to having Throwback Weekend in the spring versus the fall is now Fox is going to get their chance at covering it instead of NBC. I'll be very interested to see if there's any difference in the coverage and how many of these paint schemes actually get seen. I hope it's better and not worse, because NBC has been pretty lackluster in actually doing enough to actually show these paint schemes during the race or feature them in most ways. Sometimes they do, but for a lot of the smaller teams, it seems like in particular, they didn't get featured as much. So we'll see if things turn around on this next week. Time will certainly tell. So this certainly brings us at the same time here. I want to make sure I mention this before going even too much further on this. Got to make sure to mention again the tragic news again this morning. The passing of former Xfinity Series regular Eric McClure, passed away earlier today at the age of 42. Very, very young and very, very sad for sure. In chewing this over earlier, it really, you look at his statistics, and I think at the surface, people would think, oh, well, look, here's a guy who only had one top 10 finish at a super speedway, and he had 200 plus starts in the Xfinity Series, only a few in the Cup Series. And none, I believe, in the Truck Series, and people thinking that, oh, well, maybe that, this driver, it wasn't that successful in his career. I was very pleased to see the response, especially at the beginning here, that people were, clearly he touched a lot of people's lives. I never had the opportunity to meet him personally myself, but everybody having only nice things to say about, him personally and his dedication to the sport. One thing I would certainly add in this standpoint, especially from the statistics on that, is one thing you keep in mind with Eric McClure is if he was around today and still competing or in the midst of his career at this point, I think we would see even more successful numbers out of him with his background, much like we see nowadays with Tommy Joe Martins, Ryan Vargas, Josh Williams, other competitors of that caliber. I think he would find a perfect home among those competitors. The problem with Eric McClure, and unfortunately for him, is he was the prime of his career was at a time where the Cup Series regulars were dominating the races and the championships, and the best, and often a top 10 was almost impossible for any series regulars. And the fact that he missed as few races as he did and stayed as consistent in the sport as he did is really a testament to how he was able to stay up in the sport. Look at how drivers like David Starr that ran in both that time period and now have been able to actually get some better runs, even at Homestead, having a great run himself. I think if Eric McClure were able to compete in this time period now, even with the JD Motorsports team or anything else, I think he would have had a great deal more success that unfortunately, he had at the time in his career. The spirit of a driver out there, just running as many races as he could and staying in there as best he could. And again, really doing a lot for the branding. The fact that he just became as iconic as he was, running that orange hefty sponsored car for any number of teams, whether it was with TriStar's team or with Johnny Davis's effort, just became just recognizable. And I think that's what really the sport is built on. It's not always about the winners. There's always going to be winners out there, and there's always going to be somebody that's going to win. But you need to have a full field of guys out there that compete one week to the next and just try to improve the best they can and capitalize on opportunities that they can get. And, you never know until you look back on the person's body of work, just how effective that driver was in that time period. And I think people know that. I think people recognize that with Eric McClure. And it's sad that his career, ended so short and now his life, definitely condolences to his family and his friends and his fans, because I know he had plenty of each, and a difficult situation there for all that. But again, it's a competitor that again may not have been as much of a household name, but I think that he really does live on in the sense of a lot of these Xfinity regulars that finally are getting their attention and getting the kudos that really they deserved, that they should have had back in Eric's time, even though that seems like it's kind of a strange thing to say because it wasn't that long ago. But really, it was a very different sport, even in that time period, when you had guys like, Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards and Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch dividing up the wins. And often, 14th place finish for a guy like McClure would be equivalent to a win. But that really shows that, how important and how essential the sport changing and turning things around so that these Xfinity guys get a chance to get good runs and break into the top 10 and really compete against even Cup Series efforts like Joe Gibbs' efforts and so forth. It's really a testament to competitors like McClure. And I think that is really going to be a part of his legacy. And it's hard to think of it in that standpoint, but I'm hopeful that that's going to be one thing that's going to be looked at. One thing that's also interesting with Eric McClure as well is the fact that he ran some Cup races, even in 2004. We talked about in the field filler season. He actually ran a second Morgan McClure entry at Talladega that year. It was somebody was tweeting about that earlier today. Great efforts, trying to kind of get into the Cup Series. I remember in 2005, he was rumored to be one of the Rookie of the Year candidates to go against Kyle Busch when Kyle joined with Hendrick. Unfortunately, only made, I think, one start, had a series of DNQs at the beginning, and that kind of scuttled that effort. But also later on, he drove for Front Row Motorsports, got them into he competed with them at the at Daytona as well as Winston Open. And of course, you look at Front Row Motorsports now, winning the Daytona 500 with Michael McDowell. So again, a driver that there's always a lot of drivers like this. There's many more drivers that are like Eric McClure, and Eric McClure is more common in the series than a driver like a Kyle Busch or anything that wins all the time. And these guys, they need the same amount of respect and are owed that, certainly. And I think that is something that's really come across from the first reaction. I'm very pleased with the reaction and the response that people have had about Eric McClure and sharing their stories. Even Toyota Racing Development came out with a statement earlier today too. So, certainly good to see. But again, condolences to his friends and family as well. On the subject as well, I've seen questions, of course, about episode 7 for Rise of the Field Fillers. Still in the work on that. I was able to get a lot of work done on the script this week. I want to kind of tighten it up a little bit so it sounds better. but I'm just about ready to start recording that, which I'm very pleased with. So I hope to get that done pretty soon. I'd like to get it done before the end of May, if possible. If I can get it done by mid-May, that would be fantastic. But again, this is going to be kind of dense. There's a lot of material on Carl Long for sure, which has been a bit of a challenge, but a good challenge. And I think it's going to be a very timely story in terms of a lot of what's going on in the sport today, including what really happened this weekend, whether it's, Eric McClure, we're talking about Norm Bennings-Haller, or, things that happen just day to day in the races. I think it's going to fit very well in this time of year. So that'll be something that is coming up pretty soon. So stay tuned for some more information on that. All right. Let's see here. iRacer CB, thank you for your super chat as well. Hey, Brock, just wondering who was the first field filler that caught your attention and got you into the last place battles? Very good question. Oh, the first one. Oh, that's really hard to say. I mean, the thing for me, like going back into the history of the sport, like I started watching in like 1991, 1992, thereabouts. My frame of reference was certainly going to races at Sears Point, looking forward again to doing our coverage there this year. Probably the first field fillers I looked at would probably be a lot of the Winston West competitors that were running in the Cup Series and running further back. I don't remember one in particular. I do remember, at least not back in 91, 92, because back then you had guys like Gary Collins and Herschel McGriff and, other competitors in that sense, Dan Obrist, a lot of these other competitors that, again, not really household names, they would probably kind of go in that group. And I think it was interesting in just kind of learning about the sport, realizing that a lot of those competitors weren't running from one week to the next, that they only ran the West Coast races or they only ran the road courses. And that was probably the first thing that really intrigued me about the sport. And of course, this is back at a time where you had road course ringers driving full-time Cup entries. Tommy Kendall for Kyle Petty, or Bill Elliott, or Ron Hornaday Jr. taking over for Ricky Craven back before Hornaday got his own Cup Series ride years later. It'll probably be a Winston West competitor, but not one in particular. I think more about like 1994 thereabouts. I think about Rick Corelli, Terry Fisher, some of these other guys. Again, a lot of other more West Coast competitors. They became bigger names in other of NASCAR's divisions. But those would kind of stand out. But really, the 2004 season that I feature in the Field Filler series is really one that really kind of brought it full circle. And a lot of the teams that we're talking about in this series really kind of drew my attention to it. Derek Cope, I think, figured into that as well, even before 2004. I think in 2002, when he was driving for his own team and doing a lot of different efforts back then, that stood out as well. But yeah, I wouldn't say really one started that thing, but I would say the Winston West competitors kind of got me pointed in that direction in the early 90s, and kind of maybe look at the field a little more critically than just the people up front, wondering who these other cars were at the back of the field and why they weren't running every race. That definitely kind of started it at that point. But yeah, good question, iRacer CB, and thank you for the super chat there for sure. Let's see. Yeah, guys like Jim Inglebright. Yeah, there you go. Morgan Shepherd, other competitors at the same time. Oh, is it buffering again? Shoot, I'm not getting a warning on here, but hopefully that's not great. But let me know in the chat there if we're getting any other buffering issues here. It's not a whole lot I can do on that, unfortunately, but we'll do the best we can here for the remainder of the show. It would be neat. I mean, it's kind of a last minute thing. I would be very surprised if somebody doesn't do an Eric McClure throwback at Darlington next week, and actually Charlie Glotzback one too, given his passing recently as well. It would be interesting to see one or both represented, but certainly McClure, especially in the Xfinity series. I think there's certainly some opportunities there. I haven't seen as much about what they're doing at Johnny Davis's team, at least unless I missed it. But there's definitely an opportunity there, given that he ran the zero car for a lot of times in his career. Looks good to me. Okay, seems to be better. Okay, that's good. Any more starting grids planned for this season? Again, that's still one I have as a stretch goal in the Patreon, patreon.com/LascarOnBrock. That's one that we have set. If we reach our next goal on that, that's definitely one that we're looking at. Not anything planned right now. I definitely wanted to. I should have mentioned this earlier. There's another person, speaking of starting grids, that posted one. It was Kevin Valdez. I want to give a shout out to him. I meant to retweet this earlier, but I didn't. But I'll go ahead and drop the link in the chat here, and so you guys can check it out. He actually did a starting grid for today's race, doing the Bushy McBush Race 400. I should have done a grid or at least something with that beforehand. But kudos to him for doing one, because I would have loved to have an opportunity to say, ladies and gentlemen, I am Brock Beard, and this is your starting grid as they have qualified for the Bushy McBush Race 400. And that would probably be the way there. So definitely one there to clip out there if you guys need that. I was definitely thinking about that over this weekend, but unfortunately didn't have the time to put together a grid there. But kudos to Kevin for putting one together. So definitely check that out. He's only got a few views on it there. So definitely like that one up there if you get the chance. He did a solid job on that too. So if you're watching, much appreciated. All right. Let's see. So we'll get into our trivia segment here in just a little bit. We'll get this here on the same time. Ooh, someone needs to do the Oakwood the camo scheme that Rick Mast ran with Bush Mock. That would be awesome. That would be great. I think it just I don't have it up here with me, but I have one of the die casts of the Remington. I think it was the 97 version. There were some really good ones. Morgan Shepherd ran one and Rick Mast ran the other. And I think Mast's was probably my favorite, where it had kind of almost this like tan background on it there. It just looked really beautiful. Hopefully they can get something like that they can run again, but that'd be one to kind of look at there too. We'll do our trivia segment here in the meantime. We'll also do our show and tell segment. I got something for that to kind of lead into Throwback Week next week. All right. Whoop, hang on. Let's make sure we're good to go here. Shoot. Okay. McDowell does a JD McDuffie throwback. I mean, you never know. I mean, I know they did that 2016 one. I still have my receipt when I was trying to pre-order the Landon Castle JD McDuffie throwback that they ended up not producing. That's a bummer. I'll probably do a custom order one of these days. That's just not on my high on my list right now, but one of these days I'll have to do that. Thomas Rowan, it's your birthday. Happy birthday, Thomas. Well, thank you for joining me on the chat here today as well. So happy birthday. All right. I got some other stuff I'm working on here in the meantime. I've got the not only the video for the field fillers, but also I'm kind of working on getting some die cast wrapped up. I've been kind of working on making the die casts that I send out for the people in the $10 level, the Patreon, and also people can pick up other ones if they want within the Patreon there. I'm kind of trying to make those look a little bit more I have kind of a different design in mind. I found some special bubble wrap envelopes there that kind of make the cars look a little cooler. I want to make them kind of like blind bag things. Those of you that are in the $10 level, you know about that, but there's also that option out there. But those are always fun to distribute. I got some other ones put together this past weekend to work on there too. So definitely check that out if you're interested. Again, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. All right. So again, the categories for our trivia segment are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Go ahead and mention in the chat which category you'd like, and we'll jump into that. NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Thanks to your worthless pieces of F Incorporated 400 at Kansas. Yeah, there you go. You never know. It could be something really weird like that. Still getting. I'm working on something with the Derek Cope book. I know I haven't had a lot of updates on that lately. Still working on something to maybe get that to the next level here. So don't have any other news on that. Things are kind of still up in the air there, but it does have to do with publication there. So I'm kind of working on that, but hope to have some more updates on that later on this summer. Okay, we got categories for pits, teams, tracks. Okay. All right. So in the meantime, as I adjust my Michael Lynette shirt, let's do our show and tell segment. This one here, I kind of want to talk about, again, some diecast or teams that you don't really see that much anymore. This here I have is a Matchbox, I guess this is 187 scale hauler for good old Jimmy Air Horton. Jimmy Horton, kind of a follow-up from Talladega last week, famously flipped the number 32 car out of the track after his terrifying accident with several drivers in 1993 Die Hard 500. This is actually, I guess, his 92 paint scheme, the Active Racing Miles Concrete entry. You really don't see this scale with transporters these days. I guess they make the transporters at 64 scale so you can actually fit the cars inside. But I think this is actually a little bit easier if you're setting up like a nice layout or something. You just don't see these as much these days, and especially for teams that aren't really that popular or popularly represented. I think this would actually be kind of a neat throwback for Bubba Wallace's team coming up next week. It may be a little bit too, in the know versus running. I think Jimmy Spencer would probably be the best option, running the red and white Winston paint scheme there. But a nice one would be pretty hip, especially since it's just a reversal of this car number here, the 32. The fact that Jimmy Horton had that wreck at Talladega and then a very spectacular accident at Atlanta in the ARCA race earned him the nickname Air Horton. If they do the whole Air Horton, Air Jordan thing, that would be an interesting one to turn around. So, but again, kind of an interesting one. The paint scheme that he ran was very basic. It's just a red car with these yellow numbers, but the hauler had kind of a neat look, especially since it was a trucking company that sponsored the car. This would be the equivalent of like if they had like haulers for BJ McLeod's team or something that they would make these days. It was really neat that back then, if you wanted a hauler for Jimmy Horton, that you could find one, and no less made by Matchbox, actually. So I thought that was pretty neat. So definitely one to kind of feature here on the segment here as well. Let's see. All righty. So we got that here. So again, we have the categories here mentioning for NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. We got a lot for see. Okay, what we got here? Rise the Field Fillers diecast. Oh man, I wish. I mean, I think that's one thing that's probably common with a lot of the teams we're talking about is they never even got a hauler like this. Like they never even got like diecast made of them there. It'd be amazing. I would have been all over buying like an Andy Hillenberg or a Carl Long and diecast back then in the 46 car. That would have been really cool. But that's even trickier nowadays. I mean, it's so hard to get anything produced and getting enough pre-orders for anything. All right, let's see. NASCAR wild card. We got a few for wild. We got 4 for wild card, 3, 4 for teams, 5 for teams. Got a couple for pits. All right. I'm seeing teams just ahead of wild card, unless I'm reading that wrong here. Yeah, now even the top teams get DNP'd. Yeah, that's too bad. But yeah, well, that was the thing. I mean, I think we talked about this before, is that, Racing Champions especially, if you order diecast as a retailer, they would send you a box of just one of everything, or maybe 2 Rusty Wallaces or something. And then everything else, you'd have to sell your Greg Trammell's and your Todd Pecks and everything. I think we definitely talked about that last week. But the consequence of that was, I think if anything had to do with looking at some of these smaller teams, probably was just looking at the shelves back then and wondering who these drivers were that weren't talked about on TV, even back then. So that would be the thing there too. Alrighty. So I'm seeing teams as the top category here. We'll go ahead and go into that. I know there were a couple for pits and other ones here too. So that'll be one here as well. Okay. So first question for teams here. What decade, beginning year, saw window nets first used in NASCAR Winston Cup? What decade, beginning year, saw window nets first used in NASCAR Winston Cup? So a safety question to lead off. Let me get some code red here in the meantime. Still no sponsorship arrangement yet, but still the official beverage there of Lascar Racing. So our first question again, what decade, beginning year, saw window nets first used in NASCAR Winston Cup? Okay, 70s, we got 60s, 71. I think it's literally saying decade beginning year. It's not phrased very well, but you should just say what year rather just, make it a little bit more open-ended. 70s, 60s, 64. All right, what decade beginning year saw window nets first used in NASCAR Winston Cup? The answer is indeed 1970. 1970 is the correct answer. And again, if you guys have any other questions from stuff I haven't covered here this week, definitely bring it up here in the chat. We've had no shortage of stuff this week, I think. I think we've covered a lot of it here, but definitely other stories along the way too. All righty. What car owner, next question, what car owner holds the record for most wins at Martinsville? What car owner holds the record for most wins at Martinsville? All righty. What car owner holds the record for most wins at Martinsville? Doritos and Mountain Dew, you're asking, in your opinion, what company produced the best diecasts? I always liked Racing Champions. If I had my choice, and of course back in the day you did, because you had you had teams that were Racing Champions, Hot Wheels, you had Winner Circle, you had all those other ones. If it was in Racing Champions, I would go for Racing Champions. I had big time brand loyalty to those. I just loved the style. Especially like the ones with the plastic wheels. I didn't like the rubber wheeled ones because they didn't roll around quite as well. But yeah, if they had a car in Racing Champions, I liked them. And sometimes they weren't the most accurate. Sometimes the body proportions were weird. Sometimes the numbers were kind of the wrong font. But I liked that. I always thought that was interesting because it's like this is the closest they can approximate to it. Or if they didn't have the sponsors on the cars, I always thought those were the most interesting. I mean, nowadays, things are so professional now, you can get the car to look really pretty much exactly the way it looks. Like there's very little artistic liberty. But Racing Champions, they were always very interesting in that standpoint. I think I tweeted earlier this week like a 43rd scale of Bobby Labonte's Maxwell House Pontiac. And 43rd scale is also a scale that doesn't get represented nearly as much as it used to. But always love the Racing Champions ones. Always. I mean, nowadays, more of my collection is really like older stuff than a lot of the newer stuff. I update the diecast for our little championship lineup thing there, but mostly if I pull the trigger on anything, it's usually older stuff and especially the Racing Champion stuff. So that's always interesting. Although this notwithstanding, again, found this actually, I think I found this at the Phoenix Gypsy tents there, the old unofficial tents. And that's where you find like really some of the best stuff. I hope they have that. They usually don't have it at Sears Point anymore. They used to, but hopefully at Texas they certainly do because those are always fun to see. So, what car owner holds the record for most wins at Martinsville? A lot of you got it already. Of course, the answer is Petty Enterprises. Petty Enterprises. I was going to go with Junior Johnson, but a lot of you picked that one too. But Petty Enterprises is indeed the correct answer. Also, I'll take the moment to mention I still do have those JD McDuffie stickers in stock that Comics by Bruno put together. If you're interested in those, I think it was, what was it? It was $7 each, or I think it was something like that. Have the details in the Twitter account there, but you can check that out there. I do still have those in stock for anybody who didn't get one when we did the trivia thing back in February, or you're just interested in them. Definitely drop me a message, either DM or email, and I can give you the details on that. But we do have those in stock still. All right. Next question. Who won the 1986 Rookie of the Year with one car, 2 engines, and 2 crew members? Who won the 1986 Rookie of the Year with one car, 2 engines, and 2 crew members? Matt DiBenedetto's doing a throwback to Paul Menard's final year in Cup. Yeah, there we go. I'll talk about JD Stacy. There you go. Sleeping Collectibles, thank you for joining the chat here. I just saw your comment earlier. First time here. Been out of the sport a few years. We're starting to keep an eye on it again. Well, thank you for tuning in here. I hope this is keeping you still interested in the sport as we head into Darlington next week. Yeah, really pleased with this. I pleased with everybody turning up here. I didn't expect to see more people in this than our Talladega show, but very good to see. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Who won the 1986 Rookie of the Year with 1 car, 2 engines, and 2 crew members? Very much a rise of the field fillers kind of thing, but with a very different competitor for sure. And it looks like a lot of you got it already. The answer is indeed Alan Koike. Alan Koike is the correct answer. Alan Koike. Saints NASCAR fan 14. Glad you liked the Michael Lynette shirt for sure. This one I actually got at back when they had the tents instead of the haulers, and this was at like their discount section. So, and this, so I definitely, I love that. They really do need to bring that back. That was a change that actually kind of worked. Sounds like you got an official call on the inspection. I wasn't planning on waiting that long, but it looks like we might actually have that. I know it took a little while to get started here. Ooh, Travis Joyner just posted a picture of some mac and cheese that looks really good. Doggone it. Let's see. I forgot what I was looking for. Oh, yes, Pakras. There we go. Yes, thank you. Pakras, 2 minutes ago, tech is complete. Kyle Busch is the winner. Kurt Busch, Buescher, and Logano cars had 1 lug nut loose or missing, which is a monetary fine to the crew chief. So, yes, Josh Bilicki has officially locked up his first last-place finish of his Cup Series career, and that will be your article later tonight. The Truck Series article is already posted. We got that done late last night, so definitely look ahead to that. Did I say Alan Koike was the correct answer to that last question? Because he was indeed. Koike was the correct answer. Thank you, No Tires Just Gas, for the heads up. Oh, is it the Triple Crown? It might be. Good catch. Good catch. I think so. Did he have one in Xfinity? It might be. Well, we got Justin Haley and Josh Bilicki doing it in consecutive weeks. I think he has. I think he did. I think he drove the 93 car with RSS Racing, and if not there, he probably did with JP Motorsports when he drove the Prevagen car. Let me look that up here. Make sure I didn't close the streaming window. Okay, good. Yep, yeah, Triple Crown. Right on. Good call. So he joins Justin Haley on that list. So that will be another one. We'll definitely have to feature that in the article tonight too. So we'll get some more information on that for you guys later tonight. So good, a little bit of a bonus there to add to it on top of the deal there. Okay. Going to Dover in a couple weeks. Very exciting. Yep. Still, again, looking to do our start of the season at Sears Point beginning of June. We're going to be ordering the door magnet there pretty soon. That's going to run both on my personal car when we go up to Daytona. Not yet. When we go to Sears Point, and then we're going to fly it down to Texas and run it on the rental car when we go to Texas for that one. So whoever wins the magnet on that is going to be traveling part of the Western United States there. Even though part of it's going to be a flight there down. We're not going to slap it. Well, I don't think the pilot would be too happy slapping it on the outside of the plane. Otherwise, we would. But that's probably not going to happen. But we'll do the I just thought about that just now. But we'll have that on the cars for both those weeks. And then we'll do a drawing for it on Twitter afterwards. So if you've been in the Patreon since our last coverage at Fontana last year, or joined at any time period between then and now, or even then and whenever we order the magnet, we of course can add names to it. You'll be entered into the drawing for that. So take a look ahead to that. All right, next question here. Who drove for the Wood Brothers from 1985 through 1988? All right. Who drove for the Wood Brothers from 1985 through 1988? Going to my first in-person race at Michigan in August. Right on. That's another good one to do. I think I got Michigan on this. Is this? No, it's Indy here. I was hoping Michigan would show up on camera. I think it's just behind here. There you go. It's that square there on the quilt. So we got that on there. Who drove for the Wood Brothers from 1985 through 1988? You got you're watching Bowling Beast of Metal? Okay, right on. All right. Okay. Who drove for the Wood Brothers from 1985 through 1988? And the answer is Kyle Petty. Kyle Petty. Glad you guessed Neil Bonnet. You're very close. Very, very close. Morgan Shepherd, you're close too. Later on in the sequence there, but before that, before either of them, although Bonnet had kind of a gap there too, I guess, going back and forth on the Wood Brothers. All right. Okay, we'll just do a couple more here. And for the show tonight. Okay. Oh, now here's an interesting one. What team owner made a small fortune in Nintendo and Teddy Ruxpin? Now there's a real throwback. You want to tell me this is a throwback question? Wait here. What team owner made a small fortune in Nintendo and Teddy Ruxpin? Yeah. Now, for the kiddos at home that don't remember, I don't need to explain Nintendo, of course, but Teddy Ruxpin was a stuffed animal, like a little stuffed bear, and it had an audio tape thing that went into, I guess, its back that it would like talk to you. It's like a precursor to like a Furby or something. And I had one. So that's how old I am. That's how you get this little hair at that point. But yeah, that was one of those many Cabbage Patch Kids kind of things or something that just took off back then. But apparently, a team owner really invested in it at the right time, made a small fortune in Nintendo and Teddy Ruxpin. Robbie Burns, yeah, you too. See, right on, Harry Melling, Felix Sabatas, Lloyd Braun. Let's see. Raymond Beadle, Daredevil, 1142. It's like, okay, you got, here's mentioned Teddy Ruxpin on that one. Right on. Okay, here we go. What team owner made a small fortune in Nintendo and Teddy Ruxpin? Here we go. Who had the right stock tips there back in the I guess the late 80s at that point? And the answer is indeed Felix Sabatas. Felix Sabatas. Why do you got that? Why do you got that one? WF Hornet. Were you the first one? I think you were. Yeah. Beast of Metal. Yep, you got there too. Doritos and Mountain Dew. According to Wikipedia, it says Atari, not Nintendo. Okay. So, again, some casual inaccuracies in here and there, but is what it is. All righty. Let's see. No, not that one. Okay, next question. What driver's only win for himself and owner Junie Donlavey came at Dover in 1981? Don't look it up. Go ahead and try to guess. What driver's only win for himself and owner Junie Donlavey came at Dover in 1981? Too many people are getting these answers right. Most weren't even born. Google cheaters. Well, there you go. Well, then it's just a matter of trying to guess it first. So there you go. Got to get on the. If you get it earlier, then it's even more likely that you get it right, or get it right just naturally. E. I see somebody put E. Oh, somebody else put E. Oh, you put E twice. No tires, just gas. Oh, Beast of Metal with another name. Carter Verhaeghe. Carter Verhaeghe. Carter Verhaeghe. I'm feeling that second H is silent. Carter Verhaeghe. Carter Verhaeghe. I don't know, tough one. Ooh, Rusty Wallace from 96. Right on, McKee. There you go. What driver's only win for himself and owner Junie Donlavey came at Dover in 1981? A lot of you got that one. It is indeed Jody Ridley. You can probably see that a little better there. There you go. Jody Ridley. Indeed the correct answer. Blake Thiemann with your ooh. No ooh rules this time around, although I guess you count the tire rolling into pit road maybe, but that wasn't really enforced as well as it could have been now, was it? Yeah, Ridley got to drive the Melling number 9 in the 89 Daytona 500. That's correct. That's right. After Bill Elliott broke his wrist, Ridley got to drive the car. Had a pretty bad wreck there. Second one is right. Okay, right on. I was starting to think that it would have that pronunciation. At least one of the later ones. Alrighty. Let's see. What future car owner learned the ropes as a test driver for Junior Johnson? What future car owner learned the ropes as a test driver for Junior Johnson? Don't look it up. Go ahead and try to guess. I think I'll be able to learn a foreign language easier than understand the all-star race format. I'm just going to roll with just the craziness of it. I'm hopeful. The best thing that could happen, of course, is if you just have a completely wild race. I think that they're deliberately making the format as confusing as possible, just telling people just like, okay, you want to win all the segments. You want to win all the stages. There's no reason to lay back. And like, they don't want anybody sandbagging and all that. And I get that. It just seems like there's a more delicate way of doing that. Just put a ton of money at the end of each one, and then they're not going to want to, I mean, you could even just split the stages up, have them all be worth the same amount of money, and just be like, okay, if you don't want to win this stage, well, you're not going to get that money. Somebody else is going to get it. You don't have to have the last stage be worth more money. You might only have like 3 cars left at the end of that. So just do that. I mean, it seems like that's the easiest solution to me. So you have to literally, and then throw the 6-minute clock out the window. See, I'm coming up with an idea already. Throw the 6-minute clock out the window. Let them just completely rebuild their cars as best they can, just to stay out there, and if they can, and let it literally be survival the fastest. If you have a big wreck, then it's like, doggone it, we could have won this much money and this much money and done that. So I guess you technically have that, because you can't only win the grand prize if you get to the last stage and win that. But, again, if you want to incentivize the other stages, then, yeah, it seems like something needs to be worked like that. What future car owner learned the ropes as a test driver for Junior Johnson? The answer is indeed Richard Childress. Richard Childress. I think a few of you got that one. There you go. Blake Thiemann, your father was right. Yep, Childress, indeed. Robbie Burns, you were right as well. So, yeah, Blake Thiemann, I think you were the first. So, go you. There you go. So, yeah, Richard Childress. That's interesting. I guess that explains certainly Childress running that Junior Johnson car at Riverside there. We mentioned in the Rise of the Field Fillers episode that he was filling the field there to help the championship lock up there for Darrell Waltrip. Certainly had a relationship already kind of going, kind of like James Hilton with Kirk Shelmerdine in terms of a business relationship there. No, not that one. How about this? Alrighty. What year did the Wood brothers form a team? Okay, that's a question here. What year did the Wood brothers form a team? Alrighty. What year did the Wood brothers form a team? All right, we got guesses for 58, 63. 50, 61. You do a JD Stacy video, Jesse Hedry. That's a good idea. It could be something like that. Maybe further down the line. I do have another NASCAR Man script that I need to do. I'll probably record that. I might record that after the show tonight. So I've been having that sit on my inbox a little too long. All righty. What year did the Wood brothers form a team? The answer is 1953. 53. Anybody get that? I was going to say like it was right at the start, like 48 or 49. Harry Loomis, I think you were going to be right on it. Jesse Krill Incorporated too. But anybody get 53? I don't think anybody got that. I don't think. Oh, no, hang on. Jesse Henry, you got it. Right on. Good on you. I think you're the only one to get it. Is JD Stacy alive? I don't know. I never really thought about it. I don't think he is. I would think, because it's been such a long time ago that he was involved in the sport. The Stewart Stinkers? Oh, I said Strikers. There you go. He died in 2016. Okay. There we go. That's pretty recent. Let's see. All right. We'll do one more question here for tonight. Let me see if I can find a good one here. Let's see. Let's see. Here we go. I think it's probably an okay one. All right, last question for the evening, folks. Last question for tonight. Who drove a whopping 175 races for Buck Baker from 1963 through 1966? Don't look it up. Go ahead and guess here. Who drove a whopping 175 races for Buck Baker from 1963 through 1966? Looking for a driver name there. There we go. Okay, we got all kinds of guesses here. We got Cotton Owens, Buddy Baker, Ned Jarrett, Fireball Roberts, Donnie Allison, Francesco Bernoulli. Big guy drove number 4. I can't think of his name. The Bush guy of Bushy McBush. Dad says Ned Jarrett, Buddy Baker. Let's see. All right. For the last question of the evening, let a few more answers slink in. LW Wright. Kudos to Nascar Man for posting that picture of LW Wright. I don't know where he found that, but that's a fantastic find. Who drove a whopping 175 races for Buck Baker from 1963 through 1966? And the answer is Neil Castles. Neil Soapy Castles. I thought for sure it was going to be Buddy Baker because it seemed like that was going to be the kind of question. Did anybody get that? I don't think anybody got that. Ned Jarrett, Buddy Baker. Goodness me. Yeah, Soapy Castles. How about that? Yeah, look at there. I can see it. There you go. Neil Soapy Castles. Always good to talk about independence. That's another one that would be very easy throwback. Just run white car with red numbers and that little red stripe on the back of it there. All righty. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. No shortage of stuff to talk about from the race today. Our next show is going to be after Throwback Weekend this next week, a triple header, no less, with the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series. We'll do a show next Sunday after the Cup race, unless, of course, something crazy happens in the news this week, and then we might break in for a show this week. But most of the time, we'll do our regular shows here at the end of the week to cover everything that's happened there. We'll do our trivia and show and tell segment and everything else for you. In the meantime, check out lastcar.info for the website, at lastcaronbrock on Twitter for more crazy stuff that I feel like posting. And the patreon.com/lastcaronbrock for bonus content. Rise the Field Fillers episode 7 still in the works. Stay tuned for more updates on that, on all of those connections there. In the meantime, again, congratulations to Kyle Busch on the victory today. Josh Bilicki for the last place finish, along with Ryan Reed in yesterday's race. And we'll have those featured for you later tonight. So have a great evening, everyone, and we'll see you next week.